There it is. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I'll begin by reading Cathy's bio, and then we'll go from there. Dear folks of Baba, oops, we just lost it. Okay. As a child, Cathy studied piano, later guitar, and then voice. She received her degree from Brandeis University in 1972. It was there that she met her Baba contact, Annie Weld Bell. I hope I said that correctly. Since becoming a Meher Baba devotee in 1972, she has been singing at the Baba Center. Over 3 decades ago, she began composing and performing her own music dedicated to beloved Baba. She has produced 5 CDs dedicated to Meher Baba: Sweet Wine of Love, O Radiant One, Everything is Music, Lovely Meher Baba, and Creation Calypso. She has enjoyed being the guest musician at Baba gatherings around the Baba world. She enjoys singing the Huma songs and Meera bhajans that Mehra asked her to learn in the 1970s and 80s, realizing what a gift those assignments from Mehra were to her. While living in Myrtle Beach for many years, she had the good fortune to work at Dilruba for Elizabeth Patterson, Kitty Davy, and Margaret Crask. She kept diaries while working there and shaped the best entries into her own autobiography of those years, calling it Dilruba Days, Life with 3 Remarkable Women at the Meher Spiritual Center. She then encouraged her late husband, Tom Riley, to put together his amazing life story of meeting Meher Baba, and they worked together for over 7 years to birth this lovely child. Tom called his autobiography More Light, An Artist's Life with Meher Baba. She enjoys sharing stories of times with Kitty, Elizabeth, and Margaret, Mera Irani in India, and also her husband Tom Riley's fabulous Baba stories as well. As you can see from her bio, Cathy wears many hats in the Baba world, and I, for one, am so excited to hear all about her life in connection to Baba. Hopefully, we may even have time for a favorite song. We'll see. I hope so. Okay. So with that, Cathy, we welcome you to our Zoom tonight, and we look forward to your wonderful sharing. So without further ado, I hand it over to you.
Thank you. That's what a treat to be thankful once again as I hear all those amazing gifts Baba has given. And I know we all feel that about our lives, looking back how Baba has blessed us all with so many fabulous gifts. So there are so many facets of my story coming to Baba with my friend Annie Weld at the time in 1972 at the wedding of her older sister Catherine to Goodwin Harding. And, you know, it's a wonderful story, but I think it would be more fun to go ahead to just talk about India and Mera, because I love the idea of sharing the songs that she asked me to sing, and maybe we could sing them together. If I would sing and maybe everybody else would mute, but I had asked Diane to send some of the lyrics of some of these songs. Maybe we could sing together. So after coming into Baba's orbit in 1972, with all sorts of lights going off and lights coming back on and all sorts of kind of fantastic sort of events happening at the wedding, Annie and I hitchhiked to Myrtle Beach. When I think about it now, I'm just aghast. But of course, in 1972, it was a little safer to do such a thing. We arrived at Dilruba, and Elizabeth Patterson, hearing that we had hitched from Boston to Myrtle Beach, called us into her office, sat us, well, let's see, must have been yes, not in her, I mean, she had her, yeah, anyway, I'm just thinking, probably called her into the dining area and sat us down and said, now, I hear you hitchhiked from to get to this to the Baba Center, and yes, yeah, so excited to be there. She says, "Now I want you to promise me one thing: never hitchhike again. Mayor Baba has enough trouble running the universe without having to take care of two irresponsible young women risking life and limb on the highway. I want you to promise me never to hitchhike again." And we went, oh, okay. Okay, so that was lesson number one. Then a few days later, we're in the original kitchen, and we had come to Baba through a series of what I might call occult experiences with lights going off and on, and it's a wonderful story. But anyway, we were very involved in what I now called hooey wooey, just seances and I Ching and tarot and all that. Okay, so we're sitting in the original kitchen, and I'm feeling all these messages flowing through from what I think is Baba, and I feel like I'm aspiring to higher planes and, going up to higher spheres of spiritual elevation. All at once, the phone rings when the 6213 number was still, before cell phones, was still working in the original kitchen. And it was Kitty saying, "Oh, I'm looking for somebody." And I looked around, didn't see somebody, and I came back. "Kitty, I can't find," whoever it was. "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm Baba's coming through, and I'm writing all these messages from him, and I'm feeling so spiritually." I don't know if I said elevated. I don't know what I said, but she says, "Oh, no, 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 no. That's not Baba's way. That's lower animal magnetism. No, no, take a walk on the beach, take a cold shower. No, 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 that's not Baba's way, lower animal magnetism." So right away, Elizabeth, no more hitchhiking. Luckily, we had given up drugs already, but okay. And now Kitty is saying no more hooey wooey. And, Baba had used all of that stuff with lights going off and on at the wedding to bring us to him. And now Kitty is saying no more of that. So right away, Baba began his work on, thank goodness. And we both lived in Myrtle Beach for a year and a half, then moved back. Annie moved back to Gloucester, Mass, where she was from, and I moved back to New York. And then we went to India together the next year in 1973, and I sang a song that Mara loved, and she decided she wanted to teach me some of the Meera bhajans and the Huma songs that she loved. And one day she called me in the afternoon and took me into the parlor and got out the Victrola, this old Victrola that she opened up, and she put a Jukita Roy Meera Bhajan record, 78 record, on this old Victrola, cranking it up, put the needle down, and this beautiful music started playing. And then she played another one, and then she says, "Now pick one, I'd like you to learn it." And I didn't know what in the world, of course it was not my language, it's not my cultural background. I said, "Mara, I don't know what it means, why don't you pick one?" So she picked the first one, and then every time I recorded these and learned them and came back, it was very scary because I wanted to please her, but luckily she was happy. And then over the years, I learned many songs, and I thought it would, from Mara's, with her guidance. So I had thought it would be really nice for us to either sing, the one that I think maybe people might know that we could sing together is Ishtiake, which I had sent to Diane, that maybe she could put up, and I could sing, and maybe everybody else could sing with me. But let's see, Khorshid had told me that in 1932 or 1933 that Baba had dictated on his board to Khorshid, sing this song first whenever you sing, when they were living with him in Nasik, in the ashram in Nasik. So this is such a fabulously beautiful song that Baba wrote, and I'm sure many of you have sung it or heard it. When your passion for God becomes intense, going beyond the limit, you will see his glory right in front of your eyes. How can I tell you what you become when you lose your ego? You yourself, the lover, will become the beloved. He whispered in my ear, the secret behind the veil. I will become all yours when you become all mine. इश्तिया के शौक जब हद से सिवा हो जाएगा, इश्तिया के शौक जब हद से सिवा हो जाएगा, सामने आंखों के वो जलवानुमा हो जाएगा, सामने आंखों के वो जलवानुमा हो जाएगा, क्या कहूँ आई दिल को देखो, कर तू क्या हो जाएगा, क्या कहूँ आई दिल को देखो, कर तू क्या हो जाएगा, वासिले हक्का होगा बंदे से खुदा हो जाएगा, वासिले हक्का होगा बंदे से खुदा हो जाएगा, कानों में आकर के वो कहे गाये मुझे परदे की बात, कानों में आकर के वो कहे गाये मुझे परदे की बात, मैं तेरा हो जाऊंगा जब तू मेरा हो जाएगा, मैं तेरा हो जाऊंगा जब तू मेरा हो जाएगा, इश्तिया के शौक जब हद से सिवा हो जाएगा, सामने आंखों के वो जलवानुमा हो जाएगा. That was somehow, I just, because Baba wrote it himself, it has such a power to it. And the conjecture is that perhaps it was an old melody that Baba wrote words to, but of course Baba is the creator, and so he's written every melody in the whole world. So I would love to share one of my most powerful remembrances of being with Mara, besides those years of learning these songs and singing them for her. The early days when I first came in 73 were not that soon after Baba had dropped his physical body, and Mara was often very weepy and was missing Baba so much. And one day, Mani had very kindly said she would play the sitar for myself and Janet Luck, who was alive and well, and we were sitting in Mondley Hall with Mani, and she was playing the sitar and singing for us. And all at once, word came from the women's side that Mara was weeping. Please, we needed to go and try to cheer Mara up. So Mani said, rush over and stop playing, and we rushed over to the porch, Mara's porch, and she was sitting there quietly weeping, and Janet thought of a broom trick that she had learned as a younger woman and did this little, bring the broom around and sort of don't let go and bring it over your head. And she completed the broom trick, and Mara looked a little bit more, less weepy. And then Janet handed me the broom, and I was not as pretzely as Janet was, and I was feeling very awkward about it. But I took the broom. I had a long red Indian skirt on. I remember I, leaned down to put the broom, to walk over the broom and to try to bring it back, and my skirt got caught in the broom, and I realized how insane I must have looked. So I started jumping around and sort of making noises like a mad monkey. I was going and trying to bring the broom up behind my back. And by this time I looked over and Mara was laughing, and everybody was so relieved because she was coming out of her sadness. And as I sort of triumphantly held the broom over my head, she very lovingly looked at me and then became very serious, and she said, that was a very good thing you did. You persevered until you completed your task. Always persevere in your love for Baba and never give up. Perseverance is a very spiritual attribute. So that remembrance of that time with Mara was so incredibly beautiful, and that's sort of seen me through many years of rough times when I've felt helpless and hopeless. Remembering Mara saying, persevere and never give up. That would make Baba very happy. So that was a very beautiful memory. Let's see, there's so many other wonderful stories. One day, Erich said he would take some of the pilgrims up Seclusion Hill, and I got a hat to shade myself from the sun and got one of those walking sticks and was following him out back to go up Seclusion Hill. And all at once I noticed there was no one else there. And I was always very shy around Erich. Somehow I had developed close relationships with Sam and Roshan and, Guy Mai and Binder House people and, Marwan. But somehow I think inwardly I put Erich a bit on a pedestal. So all at once there I'm alone with Erich, and I'm realizing I'm going up Seclusion Hill alone with Erich. And I said, where is everybody? And he looked at me very lovingly and he said, don't you like my company? So we walked up Seclusion Hill together, and when we got to the top, the wind was blowing very fiercely around the hill and across the Deccan Plateau. And as we sat in that little grotto that I think, has it been called Arthur's? No, I don't know. There's a little seat there that's a natural stone seat. And we sat there together, and I finally had the courage to ask a question I wanted to ask Erich for years. I'd been hearing people ask the same questions in Mondley Hall, and he'd patiently answer. Sometimes to me this question seemed silly or trite or uninteresting, or I don't know. So I had been feeling for Erich, because year after year he had been being there for people. So I said, Erich, how do you do it year after year? You're telling the same stories. You're so loving to all of us. And without much thought, Erich just very slowly said, you know, I don't know, except that all I know is that I am blown by his wind. And the wind was sort of blowing around us and around the hill. I am blown by his wind, and I am like dust in the wind, and he is just carrying me where he wants me to go and tells me what he wants me to say. And I don't have any, I don't know if he said I have no will of my own, but that's what he was telling me. And it was a powerful experience that has never left me. When I came back from my first trip to India, a number of us were going to go to Nashville to record this album, this record, which some of you might have gotten in the early years, the In His Love, the In His Love album. So, Bob and Jim and me and a bunch of Jeff Milet. And anyway, we had went to Nashville to record this record, and Mara and Mani must have heard about it, and all at once I got a letter from Mani saying, Mara has written a song, I've written a song, we want you to sing these songs on this record. And I was just blown away with the honor of that invitation. And they had sent the music and a little cassette, a little tape of that. Mara's song, Meher Baba, Lord and Friend, my beloved to the end. And Mani's, oh Baba, Meher Baba, my heart is calling you. Those two songs they asked me to sing on this record. And Elizabeth Patterson must have gotten word of this, and she called me into Dilruba and she said, are you sure that this is a good idea? Mara has been in such strict seclusion from Baba. Maybe it's not a good idea for like a song of Mara's to go forth into a public realm like a record out into the world this way. So I, not wanting to displease Mara, Mani, or Elizabeth, or Baba most of all, I wrote specifically and asked Mani and Mara, is this okay? Elizabeth is concerned, and Mani wrote back and said, Mara wants these songs on that record. And so that was very interesting somehow that Elizabeth had felt concerned and that they had right away written back, yes, we want these songs on that recording, on that record. When I moved to, I had been in New York and I lived for a few years in Atlanta. Then I moved back to Myrtle Beach. And thankfully, Jeff Wolverton suggested that if I asked to volunteer at Dilruba, they might take me on, and then if they liked me, they would hire me. And Carrie Bills was actually just leaving, and they needed help, and I was sort of brought on as, volunteer help. And then a few months later, Elizabeth Patterson called me into her room, which was, of course, there was her bed. She sat me down on the edge of the bed. And she says, now, dear, we've decided we like your work and we'd like to hire you. And she very proudly said, and we're going to give you $3.50 an hour. And I said, wow, because I was so happy that I was going to have that opportunity to work there. And so that was the beginning of, it ended up being 12 years on and off of working at Dilruba. And early on, Lois Brager told me a kittyism that was so very funny. I said, Lois, have you written that down? She says, no, I don't have time to do that. So I started keeping diaries just to write the kittyisms. Then I began realizing what a gift it was being there with Kitty and Elizabeth and Margaret when she would come from working in New York. And so I kept diaries over the 12 years. And you probably know that then put them together with Lois Breaker's help into Dilruba Days, my book about the diaries, the best entries. And can you believe this is what I look like? Can you see how young I was? Oh, no gray hair back then. Anyway, so I have to tell you what happened the day that Dilruba Days arrived. I took a picture of myself with this. Can you see what this is? It's a little cup with feathers in it. And I will explain the reason I had Tom take a picture of me with my little cup. Okay, Kitty's book came out, Love Alone Prevails. Ward Parks had written a congratulatory letter. I happened to be working that day. I read Ward's letter to Kitty, and Kitty, who was so selfless and had no thought of herself as being a writer and author, was being praised by Ward for this wonderful book. And she was so excited because Ward Parks was, after all, a professor, so he would know something, you know. So she was very excited that she was getting a letter from Ward Parks about liking her book. So she said to me, the letter was finished. I finished reading Ward's letter, and she says, "Oh, I'm so happy. I've got to tell Lois." Lois edited, help her write, edit the book. "I've got to tell Roz." Roz Taubman helped with the book also. Yes, it will be a real feather in their cup." So when Dilruba Days came to my door, I got a cup and put a feather in it. And when Tom and I finished his book, I put another feather in the cup because I helped him write his book. So I have two feathers in my cup. One day at Dilruba, I was sitting somehow in Kitty's seat. She wasn't in the book room. She wasn't in her office. And all at once, Elizabeth walked in and sat down in where the visitors usually sat. And all at once, it tickled me that there was Elizabeth sitting in the visitor seat and I was sitting in Kitty's seat. So knowing Elizabeth liked me and that I could sort of get away with such a joke, I said, pretending to be, I guess, I don't know, maybe I was pretending to be Kitty. I said, "Oh, I see. You're a newcomer to the center. Do you have any questions?" Can't believe I said that, but anyway, I did. And Elizabeth, without a beat, she looked at me and she said very calmly, "No, dear, I don't have any questions. I only have answers." Another time, the phone was ringing off the hook. I was trying to cook lunch, people waiting on the porch. You know, it was just major mayhem, which was the usual around Dilruba. And I was supposed to make a bed in the guest bedroom. I had rushed in there. I had put the bottom sheet, then I forgot the top sheet, and I put the bed covering over top. And Elizabeth walked into the bedroom just as I realized I had short sheeted the bed. I had to start over, and I probably was swearing. I might have been saying, "Oh, damn, I gotta defer," because I was like too much to do. Elizabeth sat very calmly on the other bed, and I just said, "Oh, Elizabeth, I'm so upset. I've got to make the bed. I'm so busy." She said, "That's what the spiritual life is all about. Seeking poise in the midst of intense activity." When I first came, and Margaret had come in from, I'm not sure if it was a summer vacation or the Christmas time, but I was sitting again. I was in the book room, and Margaret came in and sat down in Kitty's seat, and she said, so what are you doing here? And I had felt so happy that I was now working at Dilruba. I had actually, I didn't have a job yet. I was just barely getting by. But I was trying to give my all and be there at Dilruba for Kitty and Elizabeth. So I said, I'm so happy to be working here at Dilruba for Kitty and Elizabeth. And she looked at me and she said, this is a nunnery. This is a house filled with old women. You're young. You're vital. What did you do before you came here? And I just looked at her and I said, well, I taught music. I like to sing and I like to teach music. She says, go out and teach music. Do that. The world needs you out there. This is a nunnery. No, no, this is a house filled with old women. Go out and people will hear about Baba from being with you, and you will maybe inspire people to come here to the center. And no, 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 you're young. So it was something I think I might have just hidden away at Dilruba, except that she encouraged me and to go out and get a job and live a normal life. And I really was thankful to Margaret for, you know, talking to me about that and taking interest in my life. Kitty was so selfless, it would astound me. One day I decided I was going to try to stalk Kitty and try to find Kitty in a selfish moment. Selfish moment. Okay. So I just followed Kitty around and listened to everything she said, looked at everything she did. And honestly, during that day, I could not find one iota of selfishness in Kitty Davy. Everything she said, everything she did was for the good of others and in service of others. That was an incredible realization. There are so many. One of the things that Margaret and I love to do is howl. She had this very funny, she had a very funny sense of humor. And one day she started talking about some fairy rhyme, and then she went, ooh. So she was in the kitchen and I started howling with her. And we were standing there in the kitchen howling together. And then she looked at me kind of seriously with a twinkle and said, I knew we must have known each other from a past life. Oh, no, my God. She had a great sense of humor. I knocked on her door one day when Kitty asked me to bring something to her. And I knocked on the door and I said, Margaret, are you there? Are you decent? She opened the door and she said, of course I'm decent. Oh, very sweet, very sweet. And I guess the segue into Tom, falling in love with Tom Riley and marrying Tom was that, as I fell in love with Tom, I realized it was very, I had spent so many years at Dilruba, and after Elizabeth passed, Jane had asked Lois and I to take turns spending nights with Kitty. So I had had not only daytime, but just, watching McNeil Lehrer with Kitty and listening to, symphonies and helping her get to bed. And oh yeah, here's another great one. Okay, this is one before I go on to Tom. So I she's going down, Kitty's going down for her nap, and she had taken Jimmy the turtle into the bedroom and he was sitting on her bed. She had read Time magazine. When I came in to tell her it was time to get up, the Time magazine was over Jimmy, and she took the Time, she sort of woke up and she took the magazine off of Jimmy's little back shell and she said, oh, she was blaring Beethoven because she would crank up the classical music so she wouldn't have to hear the phone ring during her nap time. So she turned to me and she said, "Oh, yes, there are two of us here who love classical music, me and Jimmy." I said, "How do you know that Jimmy the Turtle loves classical music?" She says, "Oh, yes, Elizabeth doesn't love classical music, but Jimmy and I love classical music." So that was another wonderful kitty moment. So, when Tom and I fell in love and decided to marry, it was really I was definitely falling into a wonderful new life, but I was going to miss being with Kitty because I had such intimate connection with her for so many years. And I asked Tom, would he mind if I asked Kitty if I could spend one night at Kitty's? And he said, sure. And then I asked Kitty and she said, did Tom think it was okay? Yes. So then I still kept one night a week at Kitty's, and that really was a wonderful gift. Um, I think, let's see, would it be okay to, would it be okay to read a little bit from Tom's book, a teeny bit, since we worked together so hard on more light?
Sure.
Um, this
Oh, go
took over 7 years to do work on Tom's book, and I submitted it with the recommendation of John Meyer, who helped me find the book platforms, to 6 book awards, and it won 5 book awards outside the Baba community. So that really was wonderful. And because today is as you all know, today is the 3rd day of the East-West Gathering, November 1st through 4th, I decided I'd read Tom's description of this day 62 years ago, a little bit from that day at Guru Prasad. So Tom said he realized after the morning session with the Westerners that most everybody went away for lunch, and he got permission from his Pune hotel where he was staying to pack a lunch, and then he just wandered about the corridors and veranda of Dilruba, of Guru Prasad. And so one afternoon, as he was walking along, he saw Fred Marks, Darwin Shaw, and Joseph Harb walking toward him, and they invited him to go with them to be with Baba, who was in his bedroom resting after the morning session. Darwin suddenly stopped and approached me. He said, "We have an appointment to be with Meher Baba now. Come and join us, Tom." I was taken aback, thinking, who is he to invite me? Darwin immediately responded, "This may seem peculiar to you, Tom, but as soon as I observed you walking toward us, I knew I had to approach you and ask you to come with us." We walked back in the direction from which I had come and passed 3 or 4 closed doors. One of the men then opened a door and we entered the room, which was modest in size. A few simple chairs were in rows facing an armchair. Meher Baba, accompanied by one of his mandali, was seated in this armchair and smiling. Right away we sat down before him. He in no way seemed surprised at seeing me. Evidently, this meeting occurred as a result of questions that had recently been discussed and required clarification now. I was only an observer. A question put forward from one of these men was focused on one's need to actuate the longing to experience Baba's presence within oneself. Was it preferable or more beneficial to acquire this experience of longing by being in India? My recollection of Baba's response is the following, quote, "As my presence within you becomes more and more familiar to you, there will be no need for you to return to India. None." He communicated this emphatically as he moved his hands across his away from each other repeatedly, as though clearing away an obstructed pathway. None. No need to return to India. As my presence within you becomes more and more familiar to you, there will be no need for you to return to India. None. I recalled and recognized then I recalled then that physical location is not necessary for the revelation of his sacred presence. His reality must be discovered and realized within oneself. And really, after that, Tom didn't feel drawn to return to India, and Darwin went back at the request of some of the younger lovers who wanted him to go, he and Jean, but after that, he didn't return to India. So that I thought was, since that happened 62 years ago today, that was an interesting story to share. I have so many other stories, but I've just been going on and on. So what would you like to hear next, or what you?
Cathy, could you talk a little bit about your travels, especially Assisi and Switzerland? Was it Fallenflur that you mentioned?
Yes. I thank you. I went this last July with a friend, Karen Bramlett, to Switzerland and Italy, and we went specifically to the two places that Baba had said he had meetings with a spiritual hierarchy. In Fallenflue, July 12th, 1934, this occurred on this mountaintop in central Switzerland. And as many, I'm sure all of you know, in August 6th to 7th of 32, Baba was in the cave in Assisi and said he had met with their hierarchy. So both of those were extremely important. I mean, he had said that he had mapped out the world unfoldment of world, I don't know, of the world events for the next 2,000 years. And so every 12th of July, the Swiss, Germans, sometimes the French come. And I had some photos that I thought would be nice to share, that if those of you would like to see, I had sent them on to Diane. Is she there?
Yes.
Oh, good. So do I need to do a screen share?
Oh, I will handle it.
Oh, good. Thank you. Thanks. And I would highly recommend going to these wonderful places because the Fallenflue is so beautiful. Okay, so I would like to start by showing the picture of Baba with the ladies, some of the women in Switzerland. Of course, there's Anita and Margaret and Kitty in I think that is in Switzerland, yes. And the next picture is of, just to give you an idea, we flew into Zurich, which you can see. Let's see, can you see my little arrow there? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we rented a car and we went down to Schwyz. And from Schwyz, we actually stayed in a wonderful little B&B, sort of in this general area. And the Fallenflue is kind of in this area east of Schwyz. And just as a little overview, then after 4 days there, we went south, stayed at a little B&B in Bellinzona, went to Locarno where Baba had been, briefly to, actually we went sort of around Lugano, but we didn't go but we went to Locarno, and then we went into Italy, which is in this direction, of course. So I'd love to share some pictures of the Fallenflue. For those of you who would like to go someday, I would highly recommend it. Here is our little converted convent, beautiful little convent building that has became a B&B. And I think the next one is you can see those Swiss flags blowing in the Swiss breeze. And it just, though the Alps are just so absolutely gorgeous, and the buildings, that those traditional Swiss buildings are gorgeous. And just to this, I don't know if you can see that there's a truck that has these windows, that there were windows that they were going to install in some building, and on the side of the truck it said Fenster, and I realized that Fenster in German means windows, so I wrote right off to David Fenster and told him I was remembering him in Switzerland because I saw those windows, and Fenster means windows in window in German. Sigristenhaus, I would highly recommend. This is converted a convent with the little chapel next door. And moving right along, just the beautiful little, I don't know, these little Swiss chairs and the scenes, the kind of rustic look that sort of reminded me of the center, but a la Swiss. And then moving right along, I decided I was going to be a princess, and I was holding my little coffee cup. And my friend Karen, if you can look next at the next photo, she was a princess for the day as well. And next slide will show, we made a point to come in, we flew in on the 9th, settled in on the 9th, so this was the 10th of July, and we took walks above the village on Silence Day, silently. So if you see the church in the background down below, we stayed in the little Sigristenhaus right next to that little church and gathered wildflowers on the walk. And the next slide will show a little grotto we found with, the Virgin Mary, beautiful little falling water, dripping down. It was just a beautiful little grotto along the road. And the map we saw as we decided to try to, how we were going to get to the Fallen Flue shows Karen's right hand is at Ilgau where we stayed. And let's see, can you see my pointing arrow? Can you see that little arrow there? There's a little red road that takes you to this precipitous this huge mountain that you're looking down from, where Baba went into seclusion. And we were driven there by one of Max and Gisela Hafliger's daughters, who is now in her 80s. And when we got to the car park and walked, the next slide will show, yes, there's kind of mountains as we're driving up toward the walk. And then the next slide is us about to walk through the woods. And on we go. There were wild blueberries along the way. And we were picking and eating blueberries before we went out to the edge of the mountain. And then we arrived about 40 minutes later, and this is the view from the Fallen Flue, which is absolutely breathtakingly beautiful. And looking at the next slide, you just get the feeling about the expansiveness of this incredible view. Schwyz is down below, and Lake Luzerne is in the distance. And the next slide shows just another view of that incredible, the precipitous drop into the valley below. And so Baba had been there on was it July 12th, 1934. And there's incredible stories about that. Oh, yeah, here we go. These are some of these Swiss and Germans who were there, and Actually, the two to the far left are from Slovenia. And the next slide shows, let's see, more of the folks from Germany and Switzerland. And then the next shows everybody who was there. Uh, Probably know Ursula and Dieter Lange from Germany. Anyway, I could go on and on, but it was
And
a
one
merry
of our
band.
late night regulars right here.
I
She'll
Oh,
be
yeah,
with us.
Johannes and
oh,
forget her name.
good.
Very
Oh,
initiative.
I'm so glad. So they come on to Zoom. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Do Ursula and Dieter ever come to your? No.
I just remember seeing them.
Okay. So the next photo shows, let's see, I'm just trying to remember oh yeah. It was raining a little lightly by the time we were about to leave. So there we are gathered together. We had a wonderful saying the arti and singing some songs together. And then we departed, and here we are about to go back to our little Sigristen house, our nice little B&B. And then the next shows a little grotto, a little shrine to Bruder Klaus. Heilige Bruder Klaus was a saintly monk who was uh, able, through his loving ways, to bring warring factions together to agree on some sort of a confederation that was actually the beginning of Switzerland. He was sort of like the father of the Swiss country. And during Baba's time, during that day of strict, whatever Baba was doing when he was working with his spiritual hierarchy, one of the Mandali nearby saw this tall, thin, bony man sort of appear near where Baba was, and that's what Bruder Klaus looked like. So some people thought that he had come to the meeting too. So that was a wonderful shrine to see. And the next shows, I can't remember what's coming next. I think the next slide shows just beautiful wildflowers along the path from the Fallen Flu. And then we went the next day to Lake Lucerne, and, beautiful, actually very hot day, and enjoyed more time together with the group. And then Karen and I left and went over the Goddard Pass, which Baba had also been over, going into southern Switzerland. And this and the next show the Goddard Pass. And then we came down into Ticino, which is southern Switzerland, which is actually mostly Italian speaking. This was our little B&B. This is a picture of Baba okay, whoopsie doodle. Woo! Can you go back? Oh, golly, gee. Okay, that's good. Thank you. This is a picture of Baba in Locarno, in a suburb of Locarno called Solduno or Suldono. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but many of you have seen those pictures. This is after Baba recovered, in Myrtle Beach after the 52 accident, and then he went to New York, for the last 2 weeks of July. And then he went to Switzerland and in August. So this is Baba in southern Switzerland in Locarno, where we went to a church, which is coming up next. This church was a church Baba visited during the time that he was recovering at Hetty and Walter Mertens. But he went to this church called Maria del Sasso, and the next photo shows, there's a Lake Maggiore with this beautiful church on this, it's like built up on a mountainside. And there's an interesting story I'd like to share as we go along, and I'll show you the next slide or two. That's an interior of the Madonna del Sasso. And the next shows a walkway up past these little shrines that held um, carvings of the different stations of the cross. And next slide, please. There are these, you see these little white shrines, and there are these carved stations of the cross. And Baba, the story goes, walked up this very steep hillside, and then he showed the next. I think there's a little video of this. Yeah, if you can show, I tried to get a feeling for you of how steep this was and how these stations of the cross, you had to walk up quite a hill, and these depictions of Christ's suffering are very, very intense. And Baba was looking at these stations of the cross as he walked up to this church, and he said to the Mandali who were with him that he said, "This reminds me of when I was Jesus and I was carrying the cross." Oh, yeah, that there was a fat man that kicked me, and he was so fat that he fell down. So Baba was remembering and looking at these stations of the cross, this incident that had happened with this fat man that had tried to kick Jesus and was so fat that he fell over. That was a kind of an intense story to read. The next few slides, if you would go over, they're family people I met in. I don't. Yeah. Okay. Going on. Those are stories for another time. And yes, those are pastries in Italy. Now we're in wonderful Italy with its fabulous cappuccinos and pastries, and on we go. Pastry shops that you could, oh God, feel like you'd like to die and go to heaven after you have some of that food. This is also from that visit to relatives in Verona. So this keep going, and that's from Verona also, but I would like you to keep going to, what's this? I don't remember. Oh, okay, there is a Colosseum, a small Colosseum in Verona, which we didn't have time to go into, but that's what that Colosseum is like, and they have all sorts of operas in the summer and all year, I think. The next slide is, whoopsie doodle. It was extremely hot in Italy, by the way. It was wonderful to get to go on to Assisi because it was so much cooler. Then we went to Venice, and many of you have, I think, have been to Venice. And let's see, the next slide shows St. Mark's, and those, you've seen pictures of Baba sitting beneath those pedestals, those big columns.
Yes.
I wasn't quite sure which one was the one that Baba had sat under, but there are three of them in front of St. Mark's. I had thought that they were those columns, but of course, when I came back, I realized I hadn't done my research, that Baba had been beneath those beautiful bronze columns. Anyway, that Venice was so full of tourists and heat that we were just happy to know. Yeah, there's Baba beneath one of those bronze pedestals in 32, wasn't that? I think he was, where was it, 34? See, all these dates are here. Let's see, Baba was in Venice in 32, August of 32. Okay. And the next slide shows us having dinner looking out over the Grand Canal with St. Mark's across the way. We stayed on an island near the main island. And yes, we were just very amazed at the beauty of Venice. And on we go to Assisi. Yeah, that was just an incredibly beautiful fossil embedded into one of the marble floor stones in St. Mark's. And the sun setting over Venice. and off we went to Assisi, which, as those of you who have been there know, is just one of the most incredible places in the whole world. And we weren't there during poppy season, but I got some of these photos from Carolyn Ball, who was kind enough to lend me. And some of these, that's St. Clair's Cathedral, and looking down to the valley below. And we were so, I would say, yeah, if you could go to the nighttime scene, the vibrations were so strong that we couldn't sleep. So, and there was a full moon. So if you just follow the next few photos, you'll see that we just stayed up and just watched the moon setting in the west over St. Clair's, and just sort of vibrating with this. And then if you can see there's a white horse in the clouds. I don't know if you can see the head and then the legs of the white horse over here. That was beautiful. And then we went to St. Clair's the next day, and her body is enshrined below in a crypt, and it's incredibly powerful there. For those of you who have been there, yeah, those of you who would like to go, of course, as you know, everybody says, please go. It's very amazing. The basilica where Francis's body is buried. Of course, none of those big church buildings were there way back then. Everything was wooded and very simple. And this is the crypt where Saint Francis is buried. That's wonderful. The Portiuncula, the little church, is inside of this bigger, monstrous basilica that was built later. Inside, if you go to the next slide, is, there was a little, one more beyond this one. Yeah, one more. This is where, oopsie doodle. Whoa, Nellie Bell. Yeah, thank you. This is where Francis he was in the woods living with his first disciples. That also, the Portiuncula, this little tiny chapel, has an unbelievable atmosphere. And let's see, the main square of Assisi, and then I just saw a nun walking up one of the roads through Assisi, and it just felt very timeless. So I snapped that shot. And let's see. And then we were able to have a wonderful lunch with Valeria in Assisi, and she was fabulous. I think she's in her mid to later 80s and going strong, telling her story about how she resisted Baba for years. And then the next slide shows her comparing stories with Karen, because Karen resisted. And they were both laughing about how they kept trying to run away, and Baba thankfully grabbed them. And then that's St. Rufino. This is the church where Francis was preaching once he became more well known, and many would come hear him. Valeria looks like she's singing an Italian love song. And then those of you who have been there, the Hermitage, and at the top, near the top of the mountain. And when we went, we were happy to see this modern sculpture that reminded us of Baba's tomb, with all the different religions symbolized. And as we walked toward the path, we looked down into the valley, and the beauty of the landscape is incredible. Emily Meyer met us, and she lives in Assisi, and she took us to the cave. So there she is walking down, and Karen walking behind her. And Emily told us that the cave Baba meditated in, that Francis had also meditated in, was called the Beato Andrea da Spello cave. And so that's the one we went to. And that map Carolyn Ball shared, and she said the cave that, I think she said this is the cave, that there are a number of caves, but this is the one that Baba had meditated in. And when we got to the cave, I was kind of surprised at how small it was. And then Emily take next slide, please. The sort of like and then next slide. There was like a fencing that she took away from that doorway, and we were able to go in and sit there. And I would say that was one of the high points of my trip to Europe, just being in the cave. When we came out after being there, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, time was disappearing. Next slide, please. And then Karen and and then the next slide, all at once we saw a young woman outside the cave, and she looked somehow familiar. Oops, if you could go back once, thank you. And she said, Jay Baba. So, I said, Jay Baba, where are you? Who are you? And she said, are you Cathy Haas? Or are you Cathy Haas? I remember you came to my house when I was 9 years old, and you and Bob Brown came and visited. And her mother was married to Ron Bluestein? Yeah. And we had been to her house when she was 9 years old. And of course, I hadn't seen her since then. And her name is Mary Lloyd. And she is a Sufi, and she had traveled to Assisi, and there she was outside of the cave. So that was pretty amazing to meet her after all those years. The cave is so powerful. I think Francis's message of giving up everything that stands in the way, like what Baba said to Tom when Tom went to see Baba in 62, was so powerful because, Baba was there meditating, and Francis was there, and that energy is still so much there. And I just felt like Baba's calling us all to do that in our own ways, to give up everything that stands in the way. We could go on and on about that, but okay. And then Baba, after he had been in the cave, he had gone to this hotel, Savoy, where he had taken a bath before he left. So Valeria took us to this hotel to show us that this is where Baba had stayed. The next slide just shows the name of the hotel, and the next shows an interior, kind of an old English hotel. And then
And that's a phone booth right here.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's right. And I think we're coming down to the end of the slides. Yes, then going home and having happy thoughts of getting back to our wonderful hostel. Oh yes, those of you who have been to Assisi, San Damiano was where the Francis and his monks had been, and then he actually gave this to Claire and her sisters, and so this became the convent for the women Franciscans, and it has such a powerful feeling. One of the most powerful experiences was being inside of this building, in the room where the sign says where St. Clare passed away. Just incredible sanctity. That's inside San Damiano, and where the Franciscan women were housed. On we go to, I can't remember what's, oh, the very sweet American Franciscan who ran the hostel where we stayed. which I would highly recommend. I can tell you all about it if you'd like to know. And many Baba lovers have stayed there. Then this we could just pass through quickly because we went on to Rome, and that's the Pantheon, and we have all sorts of that was. Oh yes, this is important. When I got home, at morning after getting home, I saw this snail crawling across my back porch steps. And I thought that the message was now it's time to slow down. So that's the end of my slideshow.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
I'd love to, since I've been talking away, I'd love to hear other people share any
Mm. Yeah.
anything they'd like to share.
Well, these are certainly beautiful memories you have, Kathy, of your trips, and thank you for sharing those lovely pictures. And yeah, if anybody has questions for Kathy, please raise your hands and go ahead. Let's see. Actually, I would like to ask you, Kathy, when did you first meet Tom, and was that in Myrtle Beach, and how did that come about?
Oh, let's see. Let's see. I saw Tom, because he was living in Myrtle Beach with his first wife, Yvonne, and um, after they divorced, he was, yeah, we met through mutual friends, and had a lot in common. My
Mhm.
dad was an artist, and that was part of, my mom was a musician, dad was an artist, so I had that sort of draw toward an artistic soul. Of course, he was Baba man through and through, and
Mhm.
yeah, so it was meant to be. And at first, I was so attached to Kitty that even though I was madly in love with Tom and I wanted to marry him, I was very torn for a little while. And I never thought to myself that Kitty would pass away. But when Kitty passed away, I realized, oh, how sweet of Baba. He's given me a companion to travel my life with now. You know,
Mhm.
I just thought it would go on forever and ever
Mhm.
with Kitty. I did. I think Diane, I had shown these. Do you? Can you show the reflections that I put at the back of my Dilruba Days book?
Sure, hold on for a sec.
Uh, about 10 months after Kitty passed, I had a very powerful dream.
Oops.
Kitty, we were following Kitty through it was like a European landscape, and all at once she turned around, and my friend Lois and I were right behind Kitty, and we almost kind of fell into Kitty as she turned around, and very intensely she looked at me and Lois and the others behind, and she said, "What have you done to utilize the training that I have given you?" And I thought, what have I done to utilize the training that Kitty gave me? I called Lois and we talked about it. And at the end of my Dilruba Days book, I put this
Showed your screen.
reflections. But if you would, I could sing this song if you'd like me to sing a song. That's a bhajan.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay,
That-
so this is one of the songs Mara had me learn. Dil to Mera. It's a Mira bhajan, and Mara told me that Baba was on a balcony in Dehradun, and some boys came beneath the balcony singing this: "My heart is won over by you, Krishna. You said in the Gita you'd come back in the Kali Yuga, but why haven't you come in front of us now?" And of course, there is Krishna right in front of them. And Baba looked at the women and twinkled. So this is Dil to Mera. Dil to Mera. Har liya प्यारे कृष्णा कृष्ण ने दिल तो मेरा हार लिया Pyare Krishna, Krishna ne, Krishna Krishna, मैं पुकारूं तेरे घर के सामने. Krishna Krishna, मैं पुकारूं तेरे घर के सामने. गीता मेवा दाखियाता आऊंगा कलियुग में. गीता मेवा दाखियाता आऊंगा कलियुग में. अब क्यों नहीं आते ओ भगवान आज हमारे सामने. अब क्यों नहीं आते हो भगवान आज हमारे सामने. दिल तो मेरा हालिया प्यारे मेहर बाबा ने. बाबा बाबा मैं पुकारूं तेरे घर के सामने.
Lovely. Lovely. Thank you.
Yeah,
So lovely.
that's these were some of the lessons I felt I learned working for Kitty and Elizabeth, that when Kitty came in the vision dream saying, what have you learned, from being with me? So they were very strong about no occult involvement, attention to detail, everything had to be done just right. Elizabeth was just incredibly powerful in that. As an example, she would take me around the center and make sure that there was a teapot in the cabin that Darwin and Jean were coming into that didn't have a crack, or she knew that Hilda and Roderick Dale were coming to a certain cabin. No, I think Hilda came by herself, and that she was writing a book. How did Elizabeth know it? She knew that Hilda was writing her book not at a desk, but sitting up in bed, and she said, let's go get another pillow so that Hilda can have two pillows when she's sitting up in bed writing her book. Attention to detail. She was always going into the center to attend to this and that, and often around the house that way too. And poise, I think that was something that Elizabeth was, oh my God, she was just amazing. She was so poised. And one day I took her, when she wasn't driving anymore, I took her downtown on an errand, and she was such a strong personality, and everybody admired her and held her in high regard in Myrtle Beach. She and her father were very they supported and built the Chapin Library, the Methodist Church, gave money to all the churches, black and white churches, very quietly, built the first hospital, very philanthropic. And she had this incredible presence. And as we walked out of this business place and she got in the car, and she had been especially sort of powerfully talking that day to this shop owner, and he turned aside and he said to me, if Elizabeth Patterson told you to go to hell, you'd gladly go. She was an incredibly powerful person. Do your best, then let Baba do the rest. Yeah, Johnny Doe, let it go, Just do your best, and then you can't hold on to it. Kitty, Elizabeth, Margaret had fabulous senses of humor. Lots of stories in Dilruba days about that. Always think ahead in service of others. What can you do to be of service? When you see somebody, thinking ahead for the benefit of others. Real happiness lies in making others happy. They lived that every day. They would have me write letters sometimes, and they would check my letters, trusting my own intuition and my own ability. They would give me tasks to do, which was very helpful for me and for all that worked for them. I tended to be late, and that was not good, and I got creamed many times by them, but thank God I did, Punctuality is very important. It was with Baba and it was with them. And sometimes things in the community would get dicey, and Elizabeth or Kitty would ask me about it, and I think they were trying to say, take your stand on the truth within, just you have your feeling about it, and you have to, that truth is what there was the integrity of one's own inner intuitive voice.
He's a good boy.
Anyway, I feel like I'm talking too much. Maybe I should ask other people to. Should anybody like to say anything?
Well, we have a
Yeah.
couple questions. I just want to say that we usually end in like at 11:30, which is
Yeah.
5 minutes. So why don't we call
Okay.
on and Gail and then call it a
Yeah.
night so people can
So,
get
yeah, Gail, go ahead.
Um, I'm so glad to see you, Kathy. I
Yeah.
am staying at the Alvarados while they're in Myrtle Beach for a month. And one of my tasks is to send you a letter from Elora Macaulay. Can you put in the chat your address? I mean, since this is being recorded, you don't want to say it out loud, but would you put it in the chat to me? I'm
Oh,
Gail
sure.
Merrill. That would be great.
Wow, a letter from, how old is she? 3 or something?
4. She's
Oh.
4.
Oh my God, isn't that great? Oh, wow.
Okay.
The new humanity, they're coming in.
They sure
Yeah.
are.
Oh my God.
Okay, Ron, go ahead.
Thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, this is a very personal thing, but I remember many years ago, it's got to be 72, at the latest 73. I have a very solid image of sitting down on a couch in the newly built refectory right next to you and Annie.
Yeah.
But I can't remember if you were you there in say the summer of 72?
Yeah. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, that might have been it then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh God.
I definitely remember that.
That was great. That was great.
We
Oh
were
my
all
God.
very new to Butler at that point.
Yeah, we were, and somehow Theus, remember Theus?
Yes,
He had just kind of bounced in from Sweden,
I remember that.
and was, bouncing all over the place with us. We were on this high, having, just come to Baba in January of 72, and we were just like lunatics, lunatics of love. And I think that's one reason that Elizabeth actually, there was a connection there because, Theus was connected to Elizabeth from her mother in Sweden. Elizabeth was friends with her mother and her grandmother. So that we were spending a lot of time with Theus, and I think that sort of cemented some sort of connection with Elizabeth. And she saw us bouncing around and acting loony, and she was very, I don't know, what's the word, put up with us. Oh my golly. And Rosalie I don't know if Rosalie is still here, but she was there too. Anyway, she was, yeah, was that your first time to the center?
That was my second time. I was there in January of 72.
Oh, okay.
And then I
Oh,
came back in the summer.
wow. So you have great memories of Kitty and Elizabeth too.
I remember Elizabeth brought Theus over to the boathouse and was introducing him to whoever happened to be there at the time.
Oh,
Get him acclimated and yeah, that was
yeah.
history.
And of course, don't we all still say thank you, Baba, with a Swedish accent? That's Theus's
Contribution.
contribution. Oh, that's great.
And last-
Mm.
And then we have Patty, who has a question.
Well, it's not so much a question. I just wanted to thank you, really, Cathy, for this, because your hitchhiking story is, I hitchhiked from Portland to Myrtle Beach in 1971
Oh, Lordy. Woo.
after hearing about Baba in 1969. So, you know, so I got kind of the same thing from Elizabeth and Kitty. It was just hysterical. And I was shocked. I was oblivious to who they were. I mean, coming there, I did not have any, I just had no idea who these people were. And I was actually quite, you know, in that magnetism of the center. And you didn't really think your feet were on the ground even, you know, it was just so powerful and so strong. But that was just, I didn't know very many people hitchhike back then, particularly the women. And, you know, and I'd gone 5 days on the road to get there, you know, it was really, and
Wow.
Baba was swiftly took us there, swiftly.
Mhm, mhm.
It was very beautiful. So anyway, thank you so much. And I've been to
Oh,
a CC many times, and it's just, it's so wonderful to see the photos and to hear the stories. And so thank you, and thank everybody. It was wonderful to be here tonight.
Absolutely.
thank you.
Baba.
Thank you.
So with that, Cathy, I thank you again so much for joining us and sharing all your wonderful stories and your beautiful
Thank you.
pictures and your songs. We really thoroughly enjoyed it. So
Thank you, Diane, for
Come
helping
again.
with the, yeah,
For
technical.
sure.
Yeah,
Thank you, Diane.
yeah.
So we'll say 3 Jai Babas and end for tonight. Okay. Avatar Meher
Baba ki
Ki
jai.
Jai. Avatar
Avatar Meher Baba
Ki Jai.
Jai.
Avatar
Meher Baba
Ki
ki
Jai.
jai.
Jai Baba.
Thank you. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. See you next.
Bye.
See you next week.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Bye-bye.